The conference room on orbital station Argyros was designed for diplomacy, but carried all the warmth of a cryogenic chamber. Sleek metal walls gleamed under unyielding white lights, and the air filtration hummed like an anxious breath. In the center, humans and Eliari sat across from each other at a crescent-shaped table made of translucent composite, pretending they weren't profoundly uncomfortable. Elias Crane had been to his fair share of diplomatic events, treaty renewals, planetary trade talks. That one time, two moon colonies argued over the ownership of a drifting asteroid shaped like a potato. But this was different. The Eliari delegation was silent. Not in the professional, tight-lipped way diplomats usually were, but truly intensely silent, as if sound itself was beneath them. They didn't speak. They barely moved. They stared, their expressions unreadable beneath elegant, expressionless faceplates. Elias leaned back in his chair, hands folded behind his head in a manner that earned him a subtle glare from Ambassador Corvin, his superior and a man with the warmth of a rusted transmission coil. "Crane," Corvin whispered, "please try not to offend anyone today." Elias smiled without looking at him. Define offend. Is breathing too hard still considered aggressive posturing? One Eliari in particular had caught his attention. Seated at the far end, slightly apart from the others, was a tall, armored figure unlike the rest. Her armor was darker, etched with fractal patterns that shimmered faintly in the station's artificial lighting. Her helm, like the others, had no visible eyes, but somehow Elias could feel her gaze piercing through it. Watchful, still. A statue of tension. Her title was General Virea Sal, and according to Keon, the cultural analyst with a soft spot for Eliari mythology and bad coffee, she hadn't spoken aloud in over a decade. She's what they call a voxsworn, Keon had explained earlier over a breakfast of nutrient slop and rehydrated fruit. A military caste who've taken a vow of silence. They believe words carry power, and the fewer you use, the more potent each one becomes. So basically, Elias had said, poking at the gray square on his plate, she's the strong, silent type. More like the ancient, terrifying, might kill you if you mispronounce her name type. Elias had raised his spoon in salute. My favorite kind. Back in the conference room, the humans talked. The Eliari listened, or stared. It was hard to tell. Ambassador Corvin droned on about economic corridors and neutral zones, and post-conflict transparency initiatives. Elias nodded sagely whenever Corvin looked his way, pretending to care while his thoughts drifted. He hated meetings. They always felt like plays where everyone forgot their lines but insisted on continuing the performance anyway. The break came 90 minutes later, and Elias bolted for the refreshment table like a man in the desert spotting a vending machine. The Eliari remained where they were, except for one. The silent woman, Virea, stood. She moved with the grace of a shadow slipping free from a wall. One of her attendants approached with a small metallic case and with careful precision began to help her remove her helm. Elias, sipping lukewarm stim-calf from a paper cup that felt too thin for space, turned just in time to see her face. It was human-like, mostly. Smooth skin with a slight silvery hue, high cheekbones that caught the light like sculpture, and long, elegantly pointed ears that rose like delicate curves of metal. But her eyes, they were not human, not by any definition, Elias knew. Gold. Not the flat, dusty gold of old coins, but a molten, swirling gold, like light trapped in a whirlpool. They shifted as if alive, reflecting far more than the room around them. He blinked, uncertain if they were real or if the calf was stronger than advertised. And before he could stop himself, before any diplomat filter kicked in, the words slipped from his mouth, soft and genuine. Your eyes are beautiful. The room froze. He didn't mean to say it that loudly, or at all. It just, happened. The words echoed for a moment too long. A few heads turned. Corvin's face went the color of overcooked shrimp. One Eliari's armor gave a sharp click, like a warning. Virea didn't react immediately. She stood still, her helm held in one hand, her golden eyes fixed on Elias with the weight of several galaxies. Her expression remained unreadable, but something in the air changed. Elias chuckled nervously and added, I mean, objectively, aesthetic observation. Not romantic, Unless that's the vibe. Is it the vibe? Because if so, I rescind the vibe. No one laughed, not even the humans. Right, Elias muttered, sipping his caf. Just gonna stand over here now and reevaluate every decision I've ever made. Varela blinked once, slowly, then turned without a word and walked away, her helm returning to its place with a soft hiss. The rest of the Eliari followed, silent as shadows. The meeting was over. Later, in the debrief room, Corvin rubbed his temples like he was trying to strangle his own brain. You complimented an Eliari general's eyes, Crane. It was a reflex, Elias said. They were very sparkly, hard not to notice, like two tiny suns doing synchronized dances. Corvin looked like he was debating between murder and resignation. Keon, however, was laughing so hard he spilled his stimcaf. Do you even know what that means in their culture? I assume something worse than a Hallmark card? Keon wheezed, wiping his eyes. Elias, in ancient Eliari tradition, to compliment one's eyes is to invoke a soul thread bond. It's basically an emotional hand-fasting proposal from the pre-technological era. Elias blinked. Wait. Are you saying I accidentally married a war general? Not officially, just symbolically. Maybe, probably. Elias stared at the wall, then muttered, Well, I guess that explains why no one invited me to the after-party. Outside the sealed chamber, in the Eliari wing of the station, Varela stood alone. Helmet removed, eyes still molten gold. She touched the side of her temple, activating a neural archive interface. A soft voice, her own, echoing from stored memory, played in the air before her. Should one speak of the eyes, the threat awakens. Let none invoke it lightly. She stared at the reflection in the polished wall and whispered in a voice unused for years. Why now? The next morning, Elias Crane woke to the gentle, relentless chime of a station announcement and the far less gentle sensation of his bunkmate's boot colliding with his hip. Up, lover boy, Keon said, arms folded, grinning like a hyena that had just discovered caffeine. Your wife might be waiting. Elias groaned, rolling over in his narrow bunk as artificial daylight filtered through the slatted shutters. We've talked about this. I didn't marry her. I complimented her eyeballs. It's a completely different category. In Eliari terms, that's practically a honeymoon. He sat up, hair a tangled mess, shirt inside out. Remind me again why our ancestors didn't just stay on Earth and complain about rent like normal people. Because humans are curious, reckless, and occasionally make involuntary interspecies proposals. Elias rubbed his face and muttered, One compliment. One polite observation, and suddenly I'm engaged to an alien knight with a voice like silence and eyes that look like starbirth. Keon raised an eyebrow. You're not helping your case with that kind of poetry. I'm doomed. Station Argyros rotated slowly above the gas giant Targil 7, its great observation decks offering shimmering views of golden storms and aurora-like radiation belts. The place was a neutral zone, built for diplomacy but crawling with tension. You could feel it in the way people walked, brisk, clipped steps, like everyone expected something to explode, and probably soon. Elias, after a barely edible breakfast, stepped into the lift headed toward the South Diplomatic Wing. As the door slid shut, an Eliari attendant slipped in without a word. Clad in pale armor with silver tracing, they stood like a statue carved from moonlight. Elias gave a polite nod. The Eliari did not return it. He cleared his throat. So, busy day? No response. All right then, just you, me, and the elevator music. The soft notes of synthesized strings played overhead. Something that might have once been jazz but now sounded like a saxophone having an existential crisis in zero gravity. The Eliari turned their heads slowly, just once, and Elias immediately found something fascinating in the pattern of his boots. When the doors opened again, he stepped out, only to be intercepted by another human diplomat with panic in her eyes and a clipboard clutched like a shield. You're Elias Crane? She asked, as if hoping the answer was no. Depends who's asking and whether it involves paperwork. General Viraya Sal has requested your presence. He blinked. That doesn't sound like a thing she would do. Doesn't she, not talk? She used a gesture. That clears nothing up. 10 minutes later, Elias stood alone in a private chamber within the Elyari wing, sleek, dim, humming with faint energy pulses along the floor panels. A wall of flowing script shimmered behind a translucent partition, changing symbols like a living tapestry. The room was silent, expectant, and then she entered. Virea Saul, the silent general, still armored from neck to toe, but her helm was absent again, revealing her sharp, impossible face. Golden eyes fixed on him, unreadable as ever. Her long ears twitched slightly at some internal signal. Or maybe that was just Elias's imagination acting up again. He gave a half salute. So, General, I assume this is the part where you calmly explain that your culture doesn't accept returns on unintentional proposals? Still no answer. She stepped closer. Elias swallowed. I didn't mean anything serious. I mean, your eyes are beautiful, objectively speaking. But I wasn't invoking any ancient pacts or waking old spirits. Just being polite. You know, human style. Virea raised a hand slowly and pointed to a small pedestal beside her. On it, a translucent crystal rested, pulsing faintly. Elias leaned in. Is that your version of a prenup? She tapped the surface once. The air shimmered and a projection sprang to life. Three-dimensional, a flickering hologram of a younger Virea, kneeling in front of an elderly Elyari, both dressed in ceremonial robes. A voice played in Elyari dialect, then translated smoothly through a diplomatic AI interface. To speak of the eyes is to name the soul. Only the bond forged may offer such words. The image faded. Virea watched Elias with a blank expression, then tilted her head slightly. Elias gave a weak laugh. I see. So, I violated a sacred rite, accidentally invoked a soul-binding bond, and might now be your, betrothed. That about the size of it? Virea tapped the pedestal again. A second projection appeared. This time, Elias saw himself. Grainy surveillance footage from the day before. Coffee in hand saying, "Your eyes are beautiful." He winced at the playback. All right, he muttered. That really doesn't sound better out loud. Virea stepped closer. Too close. He could smell something sharp and cool on her. Metal and spice and something faintly like ozone. Then, to his utter surprise, she smiled. It wasn't a human smile. Her expression barely shifted. Just a soft upward curve at the corner of her mouth. But it radiated a quiet amusement. A flicker of something light beneath all that ceremonial silence. She raised her hand again, this time holding something. It was a fruit. Round, red, spotted with silvery specks. Elias blinked. Is this a snack? A weapon? A symbolic gesture that means you're claiming me as your property? She offered it with two hands. He took it carefully, half expecting it to detonate. It's, pretty. What is it? Virea tapped her chest, then pointed at him, then nodded. Elias narrowed his eyes. Wait, this is your name fruit or something, isn't it? You're giving me your name fruit? Isn't that like space marriage in your culture? She tilted her head, clearly enjoying his confusion. He sighed. I'm either going to be incredibly honored or accidentally eaten during a moon blessing ritual. She raised a hand in a gesture that resembled a salute, then turned and left without a word. Elias stood there for several moments, holding the glowing fruit like it contained the fate of two worlds. Okay, he muttered to the empty room. Cool. No pressure. The fruit pulsed once, faintly warm in his palm. He stared at it. She's totally into me, isn't she? The fruit glowed faintly on Elias Crane's bunk, like a tiny beacon of cosmic confusion. It hadn't stopped pulsating since Virea handed it to him. An odd biological rhythm, somewhere between a heartbeat and a very calm, very judgmental metronome. He stared at it from across the room as if it might suddenly sprout limbs and demand child support. Keon walked in, munching on a protein bar. Still alive, I see. You didn't bite it, did you? Elias didn't look up. Number, I thought about it, but there's a small chance it contains nanites programmed to rewrite my DNA into something with ears long enough to pick up interstellar radio. You say that like it's a bad thing. You say everything like you want to die spectacularly. Keon pointed with his half-eaten bar. So what's the current theory? Marriage fruit? Honor token? Space melon of binding doom? Elias rubbed his temples. It could mean devotion. It could mean I'm now her diplomatic hostage. It could mean, here, carry this so the worm priests don't sniff me out. I don't know, Keon. Eliari customs are half poetry, half laser trap. The fruit pulsed again, casting a faint reddish glow across the wall. Elias swore it was getting brighter. Okay, Keon said, backing away. If it starts humming in a minor key, I'm leaving the station. Elias gave a weak laugh, then turned serious. I've been thinking, maybe I should talk to her again. Just clear things up. Politely, carefully, without saying anything about her anatomy. Keon gave him a mock salute. Brave man. Tell her I said hi, and that I'd prefer not to be vaporized as part of any romantic collateral damage. The Eliari sector of Station Argyros was cool and quiet, lit by soft violet bioluminescence that traced across ceilings and support columns in curving patterns. Elias's boots echoed faintly with each step, though the Eliari diplomats gliding silently past him made no sound at all. He wasn't entirely sure if they were ignoring him or silently judging him into a fine powder. An attendant greeted him with a nod and gestured down a hallway. The walls shifted slightly as he passed, reactive surfaces tuned to mood or proximity, or perhaps just dramatic effect. Elias had once read that Eliari architecture breathed, which made it feel less like walking through a building and more like walking through something alive and highly invested in your personal business. Viraya Sal waited in a chamber with walls shaped like folding petals, each one layered in semi-translucent metal. She stood as still as ever, eyes locked on him the moment he entered. Elias gave an awkward wave. Hey, South Fruit. No answer, but her gaze flicked to the one he now held wrapped in a sterile containment pouch. He thought it might be polite. I appreciate the gesture, really, he continued. It's just, I want to make sure we understand each other. Human compliments? We kind of throw them around. Nice eyes, great hair, cool boots. They're just ways of saying hello sometimes. She didn't move, didn't blink. Elias cleared his throat. So if I accidentally proposed marriage or initiated an unbreakable blood pact that binds my lineage to yours until the heat death of the universe, I'd like to politely, respectfully walk that back. Silence. Then she stepped forward. With both hands, she produced something and held it out. A small, rectangular slab, covered in shimmering script. He took it, confused. It was a book. A translated copy of Eliari Ritual and Binding Customs, a practical overview for non-Eliari personnel. Subtitle, So You Didn't Mean to Propose. Elias stared. This is a pamphlet? Viraya's eyes narrowed faintly, not unkindly, almost amused. You've had this the whole time? She nodded. You gave me a glowing fruit before this? Another nod. Elias exhaled, laughing despite himself. You're messing with me. Her ears twitched. He grinned. That was a joke, wasn't it? You're messing with the clueless human diplomat. She inclined her head, and for a moment, he thought she might laugh. If the Eliari did such things. You're cruel, Elias said. Elegant and terrifying, but cruel. She stepped closer again, and this time her voice emerged, low and quiet but clear. You complimented a general of the Ninth Wave during a rite of silence. You called her eyes beautiful, knowing nothing of the implication. And then, you accepted her offering. Elias opened his mouth to protest, but she raised a finger. In Eliari tradition, she continued, this is considered adorable. His brain briefly stalled. Wait, adorable? She gave the barest smile. A small chaos. Unexpected. Charming. He blinked. You like that I fumbled my way into an interspecies diplomatic crisis? Her eyes sparkled faintly and she nodded once. I have studied humans. You thrive on accidents, serendipity. You make mistakes, loud, unapologetic ones. And somehow, you survive. Mostly, barely. He held up the fruit again. So, I'm not engaged? Not yet. There was a long silence. Elias stared at her, then at the glowing fruit. Okay, good chat. Great. I'm going to go now and have a small panic attack in private. She raised a hand. Wait. He froze. Varela extended something else. A thin, rectangular device. Sleek, glowing, Eliari text scrolling along one edge. A translator? She nodded. Updated. It includes subcontextual intent cues. He stared. Like emotional nuance? Correct. So the next time I say, your eyes are beautiful, it'll clarify I mean it in the friendly, non-marriage proposing, please don't bind me in starlight way? She raised an eyebrow. It will attempt. He took it, smiling. Progress. Back in his quarters, Elias placed the glowing fruit beside the new translator. The fruit pulsed once more, then dimmed. Satisfied, perhaps, or simply out of battery. Keon peered in. So? Did she disintegrate you? Elias flopped onto his bunk. Nope. She called me adorable. Keon blinked. Huh. That's either a compliment or a prelude to being dissected. I'll take it. He stared at the ceiling, letting the humming station lull him into a kind of dazed contentment. The fruit pulsed once more. Slow, steady. Elias reached out and tapped it gently as if saying, yeah, I know. I'm in trouble. Elias wasn't entirely sure how a fruit could be smug, but that was the best word for it. Every time he walked past the thing, it gave off a faint, triumphant pulse, like it knew it had successfully roped him into something cosmic and irreversible. He'd even tried shoving it into one of the station's containment lockers, but somehow it ended up back on his bunk, sitting squarely in the center like it had claimed the territory. Do you think it's sentient? He asked Keon over a morning ration pack that tasted suspiciously like floor wax. Keon eyed the fruit from a safe distance. I think if it starts asking for music preferences, we should eject it into the sun. I tried that. The airlock refused to open. That's comforting. Elias had meant the comment as a joke, but now that he said it aloud, he wasn't so sure. Everything around Varela Sol seemed to defy expectation. Half mysticism, half advanced science, and all wrapped in a cultural etiquette manual he couldn't read fast enough. The Eliari weren't malicious, just elaborate, like if origami had developed spaceflight and started a diplomatic corps. Later that day, he returned to the Eliari sector, translator in hand, hard-hammering despite himself. The device had been surprisingly effective so far. During the previous night, he'd tested it with Station AI's Eliari cultural subroutines, asking increasingly ridiculous questions like, how do I apologize for stealing a ceremonial boot during a storm festival? It hadn't flinched once. The walls in Varela's wing had subtly changed again. The soft, petal-like panels had narrowed, creating tall slits that shimmered when he passed. Whether they were aesthetic or served some deeper psychological function, Elias had no clue. The Eliari, it seemed, were masters of making you feel like your thoughts were being listened to before you even said them. Varela stood near a levitating table surrounded by projections of star maps, trade routes, and fluid motion diagrams. When Elias stepped in, she glanced up, not startled, not annoyed, just aware, like she always was. The way her eyes moved made him feel like she'd scanned 100 possibilities the moment he entered and had already chosen the one where he didn't embarrass himself. He held up the translator. Ready for round 2? I accept the challenge, she replied, her voice as smooth and precise as ever. Elias smiled. Okay, today I'd like to not initiate another marriage rite or insult your great aunt by blinking too fast. Ambitious, I know. She gave a slight incline of the head, which he was starting to recognize as Eliari from mild amusement. Maybe, or maybe it meant I could vaporize you in under 3 seconds, but I'm choosing not to. Varela gestured toward the projection. This is the path of the Black Spiral Convoy, merchant ships following gravity vortices between moons near the Algor Expanse. Elias leaned in. I think I've read about that. Most dangerous trade route this side of the galactic core. Great for coffee smugglers. She turned just barely. Coffee smugglers? Oh yeah, illegal in 5 systems. The Terran kind anyway. Something about causing spiritual awakenings in species that weren't emotionally ready for enlightenment. Varela stared at him. True story, Elias said. Some guy on Varkun 5 drank 3 cups and started speaking exclusively in reverse causality. Her ears twitched. Subtly, but there. He was getting good at spotting those now. Eliari didn't laugh. Not exactly. They vibrated with restrained amusement, as if holding back some internal seismic event. It made every moment of levity feel like a small victory. "I have never tried Terran coffee," she said. "You'd either love it or declare war on our digestive systems. Either way, it'd be a memorable afternoon." She gestured again, this time to a projection of Eliari bioarmor schematics. "Would you like to see the construct I wore during our first meeting?" Elias blinked. "Oh, sure." The projection shifted, revealing a sleek set of armor he remembered all too vividly. Elegant curves, glimmering black surface, and glowing veins of green-blue energy. In the right light, it had looked less like armor and more like the person wearing it had emerged from a nebula. "I was slightly intimidated," he admitted. She gave him a long look. "Good," Elias chuckled. "So it was intentional. Okay, you were going for the full Galactic Reaper with cheekbones vibe. I wanted to ensure you understood the gravity of the meeting. Well, you succeeded. I nearly saluted a ficus on the way in, just to be safe." She looked at him again, eyes narrowing, not in irritation, but in that quiet, analytical way that told him she was sorting through dozens of interpretations of what he'd just said. "I have read of humor being a defense mechanism." "Oh, definitely. Humans basically evolved sarcasm to survive awkward mating rituals and imminent doom." Her head tilted. "You are difficult to predict." "Thank you, I think." Silence stretched out between them. The projections continued spinning. Maps, armor pieces, star beasts cataloged by the Eliari Defense Circle. Elias wasn't sure if the quiet was comfortable or deeply formal. Probably both. Then Varela asked, "Why did you compliment my eyes?" Elias hesitated. The question came out of nowhere, but not with hostility, more like a riddle waiting to be solved. "I don't know," he admitted. "You looked like you were carrying a whole solar system's worth of pressure on your shoulders, and nobody had said anything nice to you all day. So I did. It wasn't calculated." She didn't respond for several seconds. Finally, she said, "In the Eliari memory tradition, we preserve the first words of those who see us without expectation." Elias blinked. "Wait, is that what I did? Saw you? Without expectation?" "Yes." "Huh. You must think I'm incredibly reckless." "No," she said softly. "I think you are incredibly human." Elias stood there, heart doing weird gymnastics. Somewhere deep in the station, a pipe hissed, and a maintenance bot scuttled past the door, making fart noises as it went. The moment hung awkwardly and hilariously in the air. Elias grinned. "See? That's us. Noble sentiment immediately followed by dumb machine comedy. It's how we cope." Varela regarded him, then turned back to the projections. But she said one final thing before the door retracted behind him. "Tomorrow," she said, "you will bring me this coffee." And just like that, Elias realized something terrifying. He was on a first date with an alien general, and he had no idea what the dress code was. It wasn't the way Elias imagined his last day on the diplomatic station would begin. Standing shirtless in a steam-filled Eliari meditation chamber, clutching a scalding cup of homemade Terran coffee, while a chorus of bioluminescent vines softly pulsed in time with his nervous heartbeat. "This isn't weird," he muttered. "It's cultural exchange. Not a weird date. Nope." A door, more of a membrane really, peeled open with a fluid motion, revealing Varela Sal in ceremonial robes stitched with threads that shimmered like condensed starlight. Her ears were adorned with crystalline cuffs, the same green-blue as the armor she once wore when they met. She was, as always, composed. But this time, there was something different. Her posture was relaxed, and her gaze held no defensive measure, only something close to warmth. "You have prepared the ritual beverage," she said, stepping closer. "I used a hydroflux filter, ground the beans myself, and didn't accidentally vaporize anything. So yeah, coffee diplomacy is go." She accepted the cup with both hands as if it were something sacred. And maybe to her people, it now was. When she took a sip, her eyes widened. Barely, but enough. "It is bitter," Elias nodded. "Yup, that's how you know it works." She took another sip. There is a surge of sensation, like a thought storm behind the eyes. "Welcome to human enlightenment." They sat, not on chairs, but on low platforms suspended in midair by magnetic pulses. Around them, the Eliari chamber reacted, colors shifting in the walls, delicate strands of light weaving themselves through the air like curious specters. The Eliari environment had always responded to emotional resonance, and now it pulsed gently, calm and curious. Varela turned her head slightly. You are scheduled to depart today. Yeah, back to the Terran diplomatic fleet. Apparently my role here is complete. Is that how you feel? Elias stared at his own cup. Honestly, I feel like I just started to understand what any of this means. You, your culture, that fruit that won't stop following me around. Varela looked over his shoulder. It has bonded to you, likely an imprinting reflex. Right, so I've accidentally adopted a space coconut with abandonment issues. She gave a soft breath, half sigh, half amused exhale. The Eliari Council has discussed your actions extensively. Uh-oh. They consider your compliment a spontaneous emotional gesture, a new model for engagement with nonlinear empathic species. Elias blinked. Wait, you mean my awkward flirting is now policy? A subsection, she clarified, entitled Unanticipated Resonant Bonds in Low-Stress Contexts. He nearly choked on his drink. That sounds so clinical. Can't we call it, like, the compliment clause? I will suggest it. A long moment passed between them, the kind that once would have been filled with political tension, but now settled easily. Elias realized just how far he'd come, from a nervous, overprepared junior envoy with a terrible haircut, to someone who could sit in an alien sanctuary and joke with one of the most enigmatic figures in the quadrant. I've changed, haven't I? He said aloud. Yes, Varela said simply. You are no longer afraid of silence. That caught him off guard, but she was right. When they first met, he'd filled every gap with words, trying to cover discomfort with humor. Now, he still made jokes, sure, but not to hide, just to connect. Outside the chamber, the station gave a low, resonant hum as ships undocked. The Terran fleet was preparing to leave, and with it, Elias's temporary assignment. But something in him hesitated. I don't want this to just end, he admitted. It does not have to. But we're from completely different species, different cultures. You have ceremonial armor that could tear through a tank, and I get motion sickness from shuttle turbulence. Varela tilted her head. We are different, yes, but in the quiet, we understand one another. That is rare. He looked at her then, not as a symbol or a diplomat, or even the woman who had terrified him on day one, but as someone who had seen him, really seen him, in a way few others had. Elias reached into his satchel and pulled out a small black box. This isn't a ring, he said quickly, opening it to reveal a data crystal. Just a recording. My favorite music, some Earth comedy shows, few recipes, and a hologram of my dog. You know, stuff that helps explain me. Varela accepted it solemnly. I will treasure it. He stood. I guess I've requested that you remain. He froze. Wait, what? The Eliari delegation has submitted a joint mission proposal, a Terran Eliari diplomatic research post. Here, co-led. By us. Us? Your jokes balance our logic. Your unpredictability forces adaptation. Your coffee is dangerous but effective. Elias laughed. That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. She stepped closer and for the first time reached up to touch his face, not with formality, but with curiosity, reverence. Her long fingers traced the line of his cheekbone, her eyes reflecting the ambient starlight filtering through the walls. You once said my eyes were beautiful, she said softly. I meant it. I know. When they walked out of the chamber together, the station didn't erupt in cheers. There were no fireworks, just the steady hum of life continuing on. But to Elias, everything had changed. Because now he wasn't just a guest. He was part of something. An alliance, a bond, a future that didn't quite make sense on paper but felt right. As they passed a corridor, the fruit rolled after them, obediently chirping. Varela didn't even blink. You should name it. I was thinking Phil. It looks like a Phil. It will now answer to that name. Of course it will, Elias sighed. Why wouldn't it? And together, Human and Eliari, ambassador and general, ridiculous and reserved, They stepped into the future, complicated, vibrant, and totally unpredictable, just the way it was meant to be.